the topic itself is obviously quite a challenging one, and being asked to present around something about the future is always a challenge, I think, for anyone to kind of rise to it and to offer something perhaps insightful and new. My presentation today does lean heavily on my experiences within Salford and within our delivery. Some of the things that we've had to change, we've learned, had to learn from, still learning from. But also at the same time trying to put that within a bit of a framework in terms of understanding the innovation that we're doing, and the innovation that others are doing, as well as being conscious, always, I think, mindful of the current situation that a lot of us are facing in terms of why we've had to change, pivot, if you like, very rapidly with our higher education and our services. So I'll give you a quick sort of heads up. My background is actually in the area of information systems, and prior to that, anthropology. So I'm a bit of a blend of technology and people straight away. That will probably give you a bit of a sense of the tone of the conversation. My current role is actually as Director of Business 4.0, which is one of the directorates within Salford Business School. So my day to day is very much about managing the way that our people are interacting with particularly the technology at the moment, but also what we're learning and trying to capture that learning for the future, beyond the current sort of pandemic situation, so that we come out of the situation better. We come out of the situation more skilled, more knowledgeable, more aware of our students and what they need from us at any particular moment. And I think a lot of that learning is something that's, it's got to land across the organization to really work. I was just saying before we came online that it does feel like we've all been in a 9-month development staff development session, and we're still in it. So it is really about the future. It's the future beyond the pandemic, but it's the future much longer term as well. So just as a heads up, then it's really perhaps thinking about what's changed in this sort of current environment, the short term, if you like. And obviously the pandemic has really focused our attention in terms of what we do and how we do it in so many ways. Just to give it some shape, for want of a better word, a lot of what's happened, and particularly in the media, it's kind of this idea of, sort of everything's got complex, everything's kind of become confusing. And realistically, there's a number of things that have happened. And for me, it's kind of this diagram. Apologies, it's attempting to be 4-dimensional. It's always a challenge, but there's really 4 parameters that I see as being sort of highlighted through COVID. And for some things, the challenges, the problems we face have continued, and there's a reality there. There's an underlying business reality. We're still facing the continuation of some of the same old problems. But at the same time, COVID has both attenuated and accelerated many of those challenges. So in some cases, the attenuation has been to, bring the stark reality of a problem we're facing, and it's become immediate, it's become clear, it's really become, if you like, huge, and it's become a problem that's had to be solved. And particularly, how do we deliver to students if we can't do it face to face? That's been a big challenge, particularly within the UK sector, but across the world. At the same time, there's been an acceleration. The stat that I find most compelling, and it is a UK stat, but it's compelling nonetheless, is that the predicted use of cash has declined so rapidly during the last 9 months that we're at a point which was predicted to be reached in 2025. In other words, the use of cash has declined over the last 9 months at a rate that was expected to take 5 years. There's really been an acceleration of the challenge because the absence of cash, the reduction of cash in the economy has impact in certain sectors. It has a major impact on retail, maybe not so much in the education environment, but nonetheless, those are the examples perhaps of acceleration that we are seeing right now through COVID. And then there's been this challenge of initialization. The big one, and I think the one that perhaps is being felt still and will continue to be felt for a while, is the sense that staff are not necessarily scared of COVID or scared of going onto campus because of COVID, but actually have discovered better ways of working, more acceptable ways of working, in the sense that perhaps they have a work-life balance that has improved against what perhaps was pre-COVID. So that itself brings challenges if we're expecting and managing people and expecting them to be present for activities where perhaps they're saying, why can't I do this online? And I certainly know that from personal experience. We're seeing that already, and I can't see that actually declining immediately. I feel that that's one that we'll still see continuing into the future. It is balanced tension. It's something that's really that need for immediate action against being able to learn and plan for the future. And one example that I can give that certainly I've lived through is the realization that as we moved into an environment where we perhaps couldn't teach students face to face, we had to deal with the issue of computing labs. A number of modules we deliver actually have computing labs, whether it be for a technical module, maybe a module like digital marketing, or whether it be something around the lines, perhaps a bit more technical in terms of website development. The need to pivot was very immediate. We had to deliver some technical skills and continue that skill development with our students, but we couldn't bring them into labs. Of course, we moved immediately online. The pivot was necessary, but in the longer term, we've realized and come to recognize very quickly that actually online labs are really effective, and in fact in many cases more effective, not just because there are more students who can be attending that lab, but we don't have the pressure on that physical space that we used to have. One of our biggest challenges was to find enough labs, physical labs, for the students we were teaching. That's not the challenge now. That's gone. And certainly my view, and one of the things that I've learned very immediately, is we will not be going back to face-to-face lab environments. We will be continuing using online lab environments from here on in. And it's that tension, that need to do something immediately, but actually learning and recognizing some of the value that perhaps has happened from that pivot. I do like a good acronym. One of the acronyms that's kind of emerged most recently is the notion of BANI, the idea that we're living in an environment which is both brittle, it breaks easily, and there's levels of anxiety. People are anxious, they're not clear what's happening, they have this almost fear that's arisen from the situation, that there's a non-linearity about things. Things don't progress from A to B in perhaps the way we're used to, that things progress in much more unexpected and perhaps less clear ways. And then there's that sense of incomprehensibility. It's that sort of sense of what does the future look like, but what does the now look like? And that incomprehensibility also, I feel, will not go away. It's a really useful acronym, I feel, because this is the space that our students are in. This is the space that, our students are kind of living, and our staff are living. And it's appreciating that there's that sense that things get broken far too easily. And there's a fear that things are broken, that actually brings out, a need for reassurance, brings out a need for a degree of certainty in their learning environments, but obviously more widely as well. One of the things that has happened, and I do feel is really interesting, is that there's been at least 1,000 innovations being labelled as COVID innovations, and there's some real learning that's come out of that already as well. There's a sense that innovation that's happened in the last 9 months has been very agile. It's been very much gone quickly. It's happened rapidly. It's had to happen rapidly, but it's had a reason. It's had a purpose. At the same time, there's been a degree of the rise of empathy, the fact that people are recognizing that people are in this in different ways, and people are experiencing the situation in different ways, and the sense that organizations and education institutions are quick to care is an important attribute, and an important one that's perhaps not necessarily been at the forefront of thinking in the past. there's also that need, and it's an important need, about sort of the optimism and the opportunities that a crisis has created. Not to ignore the crisis, but to recognize perhaps that there is opportunities that are arising out of this, that it's not all negative, that it's not just doom and gloom. And it's those sort of messages too that are important. Obviously, we're finding with our students, we have to be clear, we have to be responsive, rapid, but we also have to be upbeat. Same things about repurposing resources. It's using the resources that we have perhaps in different ways, and perhaps recognizing that some of the resources we have, and again, I'll use the example of our physical computer labs, are perhaps a bit of a legacy of a thinking from not just 9 months ago, but perhaps 10 years ago. One of the other things, of course, is that thing that is encouraging people within organizations to experiment with new ideas. It's been encouraging people to innovate. And that's an important theme of really today for me, that, people are being encouraged and people feel that there's a space where they can present and offer new ideas in a way that they might not have in the past. That this is a time to perhaps explore opportunities. It's an opportunity to explore new ideas. And that's quite empowering, both for staff and for students. So the opportunities, I always do like this coat of arms. If your Latin's not up to scratch, it means something roughly about the people are the highest law, or the people are the most important, effectively. It's actually the coats of arms of Salford City Council, somewhat coincidentally, but I do like that. A lot of what we're talking about is about people. It's really about the way in which people can find new opportunities, and people can actually realize those opportunities. It's not necessarily about software A or software B. It's actually, how do people do things differently, do things better. I'll not spend too much time on this one, but for me, the other complement to BANI, and it's one that you possibly heard, is the notion of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It's a term I use a lot. It's that notion that the external world, the world outside of your institution, of your space, is really, really messy, and that's really messy in so many ways. And that's what the students are dealing with. Students don't come in without any baggage. They come in to you, and they have all sorts of things pressing on their minds. And the fact that we are in a VUCA world is not new. It's not something that happened in March. It's not something that happened in the beginning of the year. VUCA is something that's been with us for a long time. It's recognizing that it has been, and it's recognizing that that's kind of what's out there. It's what we're all dealing with in some ways, but we particularly see it when we're talking to our students. And it's, what can we do to make the world less volatile, a bit more certain, simpler, clearer for our students. And that comes out in so many ways, whether it be something as simple as a piece of communications to a group of students, or a brief for some assessment that we need to keep clear and quite straightforward, so that they understand, so they don't feel this is one more piece of VUCA coming my way. This is another bit of VUCA that I didn't necessarily want today. And it's something that has really intensified, particularly over the last 9 months. It's not going to go away. There is an end to the current situation with COVID. VUCA and BANI is not going to go away. It's something that we have to continue to deal with, and continue to design away from, in terms of what education looks like, and what we're trying to do with our delivery online and our digital education. I do like this. It's another way of explaining VUCA. It just feels like, I don't know if you're familiar with the game Splatoon. It's had a bit of a revival with the Nintendo Switch, and it's basically teams fighting each other with paint, and trying to cover the space with as much paint as possible. And particularly 2020 sort of felt like this. It's come at us from all directions. It's constant. It seems to be never ending. It's kind of got a frantic pace to it. If you've ever played this game, you'll understand the notion of that being frantic. and it feels like you can kind of get ahead, but for every moment you get ahead, something else comes from sort of out of the unknown and kind of hits you. And Splatoon is a quite a nice analogy for 2020. I feel it has all of those elements about it in the game. It is, you know, it is messy. And, you know, one of the jobs we have, particularly going forward, is to really appreciate that messy isn't a great place to be, and that messy is something that we want to design away from in general. And messy, you know, is a label for so many things, including, you know, processes that make the world more complex. You know, we don't need them. We need some simplicity. We need some clarity of thought, clarity of action. So for us, and this is really my war stories and my sharing. The ask from our students was really about flexibility, and the real ask came in so many different directions. Again, you know, the Splatoon analogy. There seemed to be an ask coming from different groups of students, which were all different. Some students absolutely wanted us to continue delivering face-to-face in a COVID-safe environment. Some absolutely didn't want us to deliver face-to-face. Some wanted us to stick to what was our traditional structure of, you know, a 12-week semester. Some wanted us to deliver up, you know, the material up front, you know, almost like a distance learning, a traditional distance learning package almost. And what we saw and what we're still seeing is you know, for every 100 students, you know, there's probably approaching 100 different ways that they want to see what's coming out. And again, that was always there. That kind of pressure to be flexible has always been there. And I think one of our key learnings is that we always kept a lid on it, and to a certain extent managed it by effectively saying, you'll be given a 12-week semester. It will have this number of hours of lectures in week 1 through to 12. It will have this number of seminars, week 1 through 12. You'll be able to meet your personal tutor for 1 hour a week. And, you know, that's it. No negotiation. We're not in that space at the moment. We're in a space where actually we're asking the students, but the students are also being told, you know, the external world is telling them that, you know, as of next week, the UK students are basically going to be going online entirely. So the students have been asking us to keep and preserve at all costs our face-to-face delivery. Will obviously not be happy with that, aren't happy with that, to be fair. But equally, other students are, you know, actually saying, well, why didn't you do this sooner? So it was a challenge. It is, and I have to say, it's not past tense, it's current tense. The challenge has been around, you know, everything. You know, we recorded lectures for our students. The students came back to us and said, that's all well and good, it's great, we can rewind it just like Netflix, we love it. However, we'd really like to have a chat with our lecturer at the end, live, online. Then at the same time, students were coming and saying, well, you're delivering our seminars face to face, but actually we'd really like them to be recorded as well, so that we can kind of go back to them. And then we start looking at the, you know, the challenges that are being presented to us. You know, the notion of recording a live face-to-face physical in the seminar room seminar at the same time as actually delivering it is quite a bit of, well, not just mental gymnastics, but physical gymnastics to actually get that to work. And those sort of challenges are kind of constant. They've been coming in different ways. And as the situation's been changing, the requests have changed. So our learning at the moment, and it's only partial learning, I'd have to confess, is that we absolutely have to have, you know, our fully scheduled timetable. The idea that things happen off a timetable hasn't worked for us, and that's irrespective of if it's face-to-face or in online delivery. But it's also brought us to recognize that in some situations and some levels of education, the notion that what you deliver in week 1 through right the way through to week 12 should be the same, has really been challenged. And I think that's the key learning for us, that there has to be a flexibility within the actual modules we deliver, and that the students are really telling us that there is this shift, which is only possible through digital. It's only possible in terms of the delivery through an online interface. They're asking us for face-to-face. A lot of them are saying face-to-face, but online's okay. Live, face-to-face is okay if it's online. But at the same time, we want that library of material to go back to, that content to kind of consume. But then the criticisms come in. They say, don't give us 1 hour lectures, don't give us half-hour lectures, that we want more YouTube style. And, you know, we are listening, to be fair, we are listening, and we are building a lot of work in that direction. I'd have to say that we were particularly fortunate in that we'd already developed an entirely online program prior to the start of the lockdown period. And we recognized the need for an online program going into the workplace, as it were, in this case, footballers and students in football academies, where their pace was, the pace of their delivery was very much determined by their training schedules. We had learnt a lot from that by the time we got to March and a wider lockdown, where a lot of the principles we had learnt were already could be applied to what we're delivering to the wider range of students. So flexibility is just something that we can deliver through digital that we possibly can't with the traditional infrastructures of classrooms and physical labs and physical seminar rooms. And it's from certainly my experience, it's what the students are asking for. They really want a degree of flexibility, but they want that contact. They want that connection with the teaching staff. They want the connection with the institution. They want the connection, and they want it live, but at the same time, they want a lot of flexibility. And, you know, ultimately, we can't give them everything that they're asking for, and that's certainly not possible either financially or in resources in terms of actually our teaching staff, but we do need to be moving in that way, and digital will be that solution. So some of the things that we're sort of looking at is easier processes to step on and off. We've really had to take account of that. The need for flexibility, multiple start dates, I'd say flexible start dates, that's presented challenges, but also there's a degree of push for twilight delivery, that sort of sense of the 5 o'clock to sort of 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock, you know, the end of work type of delivery period for the live contact, for the whether it be online or face to face. But that twilight delivery's certainly received a lot of attention. The fluidity of the weekly structure, like I said, you know, that week 1 should not necessarily look like week 6, that week 6 shouldn't necessarily look like week 12. And that's definitely something that's on the radar. It's not something we can pivot to straight away. It actually does require a bit of an understanding. But it is also something that we will be looking at very, very closely as we move into the next academic year and beyond. I've mentioned a couple of the others, but for me, one of the big challenges is the fixing of existing systems. One of the things that's come out for us is that we carry a burden with some of our existing systems, and those existing systems are designed around a lot of assumptions. And the key assumption is that your students will be face-to-face in front of you on a regular basis, in a consistent way, week in, week out. And it's clear that that's not what the students want or expect, and it's also not necessarily what's right for the program. So the existing systems has been a lot of work, and it's, again, will be continuing work. But then I think the other thing is the notion that this term blended delivery, it's actually gone to the point of not only being overused, but in the verge of becoming meaningless, because blended tells us that we're not doing it perhaps traditionally, and maybe we should say non-traditional delivery, but blended delivery hides so much. It's very much the tip of an iceberg in the sense that it's a label for a lot of different ways of doing things. And I've seen even within my own institution, you know, we have 4 separate academic schools, and I'd have to say we were all instructed at the beginning of the lockdown period to move to a blended delivery pattern. And I would say that we've now created not just 4 separate versions of blended delivery, but probably tens, if not hundreds of different versions of blended delivery. And I would like to believe that they've been designed to meet each cohort of students' needs, but I believe that's not necessarily the case. And it's unpicking and being a little bit critical with the term blended. It's not going to help if that's the label and that's the end of the discussion. It needs that unpicking down to some of these other challenges that, you know, students are asking for and students are kind of learning better with. And I think that's the key. You know, the achievement, the signals are the students who are getting the right type of delivery, the right mix, are doing better, if not as well as they would have in a traditional mode of just consistent face-to-face. So there's real value in terms of the outcomes if it's right. So I think we're kind of facing this pressure to innovate right now, and the pressure is perhaps being felt in lots of ways. But for me, it does always resolve back to a similar set of issues. There's a pressure to innovate through just where we're moving to. It's about that sort of strategic change. It's not just change for change's sake. And we have to be really cautious about change that just seems to be a shift because it's something different. Similarly, that affects the business models. You know, there's obviously a challenge to a lot of business models that is happening right now, but that will be ongoing. And there is a challenge to the business model of education as well at the same time, and understanding what that business model is. You know, there are already signals that, you know, professional training, professional CPD type delivery is going to stick more heavily with online. That has consequences for other businesses that service the more traditional CPD delivery. There's sense that there will be a change also with what we're talking about, with, you know, education within the sort of higher and further education sectors. You know, there will be a push to challenge the existing assumptions of business models. And then there's that whole shifting external context. For me, you know, that's the point, is VUCA is so useful because it doesn't tell you what the shifting external context is. It tells us to always plan that there is a shifting external context, and it's really difficult to map. It's really volatile, and you kind of plan against that knowledge rather than specifics. I think one of the challenges too at the moment, and I see this with colleagues, is that sort of sense of availability. There's been a sort of a feeling that in some cases we've never got quite enough information. We've never quite got everything we need to know to understand what the students' preferences are, what's the best route for the students in the terms of their delivery. But equally, and Siegel's law is one of those sort of eponymous laws that businesses love, or that, you know, sort of float around. The idea of a person with a watch knows the time and a person with 2 watches is never sure. It's that sense that if you've got too much information, you're almost immobilized in the same way as having not enough. And it's kind of making decisions a little bit on judgment call, a little bit in terms of experience that might guide the hand. But that innovation may have to kind of follow a couple of routes. You know, maybe they are dead ends, but they are learning experiences in the sense that you don't follow that dead end again. And I'm feeling that myself right now, you know, that we have a pressure on us to do things in different ways. And sometimes we don't have that information, but we do have to make, make a call and make a decision and test the experience. The other thing that I think has come out, and I've seen this with just recently, I've had a couple of messages this week, is the move towards more collaborative environments. A number of universities in the UK around the events education space have been working on effectively a collaborative module, whereby they actually share across a number of universities, and effectively they contribute a single session, a single week's work to the bigger module. And it's certainly a model that I've heard discussed before, but it's only this week actually that I've seen it in action. And against all that, there is a resistance. There's a resistance from staff, resistance to innovate, and there's that overcoming of that legacy that we never used to do it like this. Why are we doing it like this now? So there's some real pressures that we're feeling, but that's not a reason not to innovate. And I think there's so many opportunities that we've seen that have come through, and those sort of notions of those COVID innovations, which give us a hint of the future. So I'm going to actually stop there because I'm conscious of time. If there's any, actually, there's a couple of questions that have popped up. Yes, so I'll answer those. I'll answer the ones that have popped up in the Q&A. So the first one has come through. How do you build a sense of community when students have mainly or exclusively online teaching, especially first-year students? It's a really good question. I sat down with a number of our first-year students recently, and I asked them about the delivery pattern and what their experience and thoughts were about that. And it was actually a surprise, the response. The students came back and said to me, well, this is all we've experienced in terms of university education. So you're telling us what the experience is. You're shaping what our experience is. And that hasn't stopped the sense of community. What that's meant is that we have to be ensuring that there is opportunities for community building activities. So we've introduced what we describe as a program hour, where the students are brought together as part of their timetable, and they are brought together with an academic, with a teaching assistant or a lecturer, to talk about their assessment, to talk about what they've been doing through the week. And it's talking about it at a program level. They're not in a specific module. They're talking about all the things that have gone on. So it's partly, if you like, personal tutoring. It's partly bringing the cohort together to talk it through with one another. And it's also about setting their expectations. So it's about talking about what they should be thinking about for the coming semester, for the coming year. And as we go into our second semester of teaching, the first year students will actually start getting some advice and some guidance around potentially applying for placements and perhaps improving their CVs and some of the co-curricular stuff that also helps to build the community. So it can't be left to happen organically. I don't feel that's possible, but the opportunities have to be built in. So one example is our program hour this year. We were already planning that prior to lockdown anyway, because we recognized the need to build community, but we moved it online, and that's actually worked better, to be honest. It's worked better by being online. The students have said to us, we need the space to meet one-to-one, and we have been basically either providing them with the spaces through things like Teams or our online system through Blackboard. But we also know that they build that community after the program hour through WhatsApp groups, private WhatsApp groups, and really, it's encouraging them to do that, not necessarily stopping them from doing that. So yeah, it's a challenge, but it is possible. And I think in some respects, the key message was when the first year students sort of turned around and said, well, you're shaping what we think first year university is like. And that is the sense that they don't know they're missing out on something if they've not experienced face-to-face in the university environment. You're shaping the experience. It's only our understanding, because we've seen the face-to-face experience, that perhaps clouds our perspective on that one. The students don't see that. They don't actually recognize that.
So the question, Gordon, it says, do you have any suggestions for how we can help students feel that their online experience is as valuable as face-to-face teaching?
Yeah, it's another good one. The reality of it is that it's one of the things that we've been hearing from students who are in their final year of study. So they've already been at university, obviously, for 2 years. They've come into this year, and this is different to face-to-face. And that's the group with the biggest challenge. The group who's perhaps the most old hand at this is different. And I'd have to say, absolutely come clean and say that is the group that has been most vocal in retaining face-to-face contact where possible. They have been absolutely pushing for seminars to remain face-to-face through all the current changing external environment. That's what they've been pushing for. it is a challenge, because that's then about shift in perception. For one of the things that we've said, and I kind of have mentioned it already, the sense that we've been recording our lectures, and that the lectures are kind of an archive of content that wasn't previously there. It's the things that digital is building that gives them more than they would have previously had. So if they missed a lecture in previous years, there was really no way of going back, except perhaps to a friend's notes, or perhaps a summary, or the slides that perhaps the academic might have put online, which is not the same as a lecture. So it becomes clear that what you need to emphasize is the value that is added by digital, and making sure that the value is being added by digital. So the recording of lectures has had its criticism. Like I said, the students want live Q&A, but then having the recorded lectures has also been seen as a plus. The other thing that has happened is that we've focused more attention on the materials that support the lecture. So a lot of colleagues have actually been pointing students to pre-readings as well as post-readings. They've kind of been mapping out, in a sense, the whole week for the student in terms of their online interaction and their being a student. And again, it's a little bit of a change in perspective, in the sense that there's a sense with face-to-face delivery that the student walks into a lecture, walks into a seminar, possibly walks into a personal tutoring session in a given week, and that's the end of it. With what we're doing now, it's very much more wraparound, and the sense that digital enables us to do wraparound in a way that we perhaps couldn't do it in the past. We're not necessarily using new tools, but we are using those existing tools in different ways. And we're doing things, for example, such as populating the students' the module calendar for a week with activities that the students could do, so suggestions that the students could do. It's kind of building, if you like, an environment rather than a handful of transactions. It's about building that space and the ecosystem of learning through the digital tools, and that adds value. If it's just a transaction, you go to a lecture, you sit and listen, you go to a seminar, you may interact, you may not. That can get very reduced to a transactional experience, and so we've been really consciously trying to build very much more an ecosystem of experience and ongoing experience, and then the value is there. The value is clear. If anything, online becomes better than the face-to-face experience.